story. Apparently, palace officials have been trying their hardest to strip Harry of his titles, but Charles...
You said, Jack.
Yeah, I agree.
So we are in total agreement. They are very dependent on each other.
From the moment the jet touched down on the tarmac at Heathrow, the whispers began. Not because Prince Harry was scheduled to arrive, not because anyone expected him back in the UK, and certainly not because he'd announced a single thing. The reason airport staff froze, the reason cameras swung around like weather vanes caught in a wild storm, was simple. Harry wasn't supposed to be here. Not this week, not at all, and certainly not in this way.
Have been bumped down the pecking order when you go to the website.
Yet there he was, hood up, shoulders tight, moving with the urgent, clipped pace of a man who had just received a phone call he never wanted to get. Every step radiated tension. Every glance suggested he knew eyes were glued to him, judging every move. And why? Well, that's where the story takes a sharp, jagged turn straight into chaos.
Is my favourite source for royal news, and quite right, not that we're biased. Harry said in his BBC interview that he was forced to step away from royal duty due to security concerns.
The rumour mill had been churning for days, hints spilling out about something strange, almost conspiratorial, brewing behind palace walls. People close to the royal household were dropping cryptic lines like, "Something big is coming," or "Watch the titles carefully," words that sent royal watchers into a frenzy. That's all I'll say. And you know how royal watchers operate. Give them one crumb of information and suddenly there's an entire loaf of speculation floating across the internet. But then it escalated. Fast. A leak. A whisper. A message passed from one insider to another until it reached the press in the form of a 4-word bombshell. Secret strip order drafted. That's when everything detonated. Tabloids exploded. Social media ignited. Talk shows went wild. People were asking the same questions. Strip what? Strip who? And why in secret? Some claimed it was about titles. Others whispered about security privileges. A few suggested something even bigger, something unprecedented that could rewrite royal history. But the palace said nothing, not a single word, not a blink. Radio silence so loud it practically echoed across the city like a warning siren. And then Harry's plane appeared. That's when speculation erupted into a full-blown hurricane. Harry has kept a deliberately careful distance from the UK ever since stepping back from royal duties, treating London like a city riddled with landmines. Every appearance calculated, every visit short, every departure immediate. But this time was different. It wasn't for a charity event. No Invictus engagement. No legal matter forcing his hand. This was personal, and anyone watching him stride briskly across that tarmac could tell something had rattled him. People online immediately began connecting dots. What if the alleged strip order was about his remaining royal privileges? What if the palace had finally decided to act, to enforce consequences long whispered about, but never realised? And if that was true...
Harry and Meghan of their royal titles, the New York Post is reporting that locals in the UK say enough is enough, especially after Prince Harry's disastrous BBC interview, which aired.
Why now? Why suddenly? Why quietly? Meanwhile, the palace only fueled the storm. Instead of denying the rumour, they did what they always do when trouble simmers. They tightened the circle, clammed up, refused to comment, leaving tension hanging thick in the London air. You could almost imagine the thick stone walls of Buckingham Palace leaning in, holding onto their secrets with both hands, unwilling to breathe a word. But not everyone inside was so careful. Word began slipping out from those who always talk. Off the record, they said there had been a tense, closed-door meeting. Senior courtiers, top advisors, and a couple of very familiar royal figures behind locked doors, discussing the next phase of distancing the monarchy from the Sussex drama. That phrase alone sent commentators into overdrive. Next phase, as in there were multiple phases, plural, each more drastic than the last. And so the theory solidified. Harry wasn't rushing back because he wanted to be there. He was rushing back because he had to. As he exited the terminal, trying to slip past cameras determined not to let him vanish into the London fog, you could see it in his eyes. Something had gone terribly wrong. A man doesn't jump on a transatlantic flight at a moment's notice unless someone, somewhere, pulled a very serious alarm. Meanwhile, in Montecito, the atmosphere was reportedly tense. Meghan had been spotted leaving the house hours before news broke. But by the time media caught wind of Harry's flight, she had gone completely dark. No statements, no comments, no smiles, no pap walks, just silence. And for a couple normally so tightly choreographed, so media-aware, that silence spoke volumes, louder than any interview, louder than any press release ever could. Royal commentators immediately split into two camps. One group speculated that the palace had officially begun the process of removing Harry and Meghan's remaining titles, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, a move that could shake the monarchy to its foundations. The other camp insisted it was about something far more urgent, the potential stripping of their children's royal titles, and that possibility sent social media into a frenzy. Users posted theories by the thousands, screenshots, old interviews, body language analysis, side-by-side comparisons of past statements, every detail dissected, every angle considered. The favourite hobby of royal watchers is dissecting every vague palace update they can get their hands on. But here's the part that made the world sit up straighter. Insiders claimed the alleged strip order was not unanimous. Disagreements simmered inside the family. Not everyone thought the nuclear option was right. And behind the scenes, quiet, discreet, strategic lobbying had been happening, influencing decisions away from public view. So if a division existed, who was on which side? That's the £1,000,000 question, or rather, the billion-click question. Some pointed to senior royals, tired of the constant media storm around the Sussexes. Others hinted certain advisers were pushing for a clean break, arguing the monarchy needed protection before upcoming coronations, anniversaries, and major public events. And still others suggested the opposite. Stripping titles could backfire spectacularly, creating a media firestorm no palace could control. All this chaos unfolded against the backdrop of Harry's arrival. He stepped into a waiting black vehicle with tinted windows so thick they might as well have been solid walls. The city felt electrified. Londoners nearby were already texting, tweeting, live streaming, and the moment the car pulled away, you could hear reporters sprinting to keep up for the rest of the day. The question hovered like a storm cloud. Would Harry go straight to the palace? Would he meet privately with the king? Would he try to negotiate? Or was he here to fight? Full throttle. Every outlet had a theory, but none had confirmation. And that's what made the silence so deafening. Because when a royal returns unexpectedly, when the palace refuses to comment, when insiders start whispering about secret orders, it only means one thing. Something major is happening behind the scenes, and whatever it is, this is just the beginning. By the time Harry's car slipped into London, traffic speculation had exploded into a frenzy. Reporters were chasing shadows, helicopters circled overhead, and social media was practically vibrating with tension. The hashtag #sign strip order had blown up within minutes, and royal commentators, both the reputable kind and the utterly unhinged kind, were lining up to give their takes non-stop. Some insisted Harry had come to demand answers, others said he'd flown in to stop something already in motion, and then there were those who suggested he hadn't even known what was happening until the last second, implying someone inside the palace had deliberately kept him in the dark. If that were true, it would explain the panic, it would explain the rush, it would explain the tension etched into his face at the airport. Meanwhile, palace courtiers were doing their usual dance, avoiding eye contact, speaking softly, disappearing into side corridors whenever journalists got too close. But even though they weren't speaking publicly, they were definitely speaking privately, and that's how yet another rumour slipped out. The king had been advised to act sooner rather than later. Sooner? For what exactly? That's what nobody could say with certainty. But the phrasing alone, deliberate, ominous, made everyone lean in a little closer. Royal watchers began digging through every legal nuance involving titles. Some argued that because Harry and Meghan stepped back, their remaining titles could technically be removed by Parliament if enough pressure built. Others reminded everyone that taking away titles would be unprecedented for modern royals, though not impossible. Then came the nudge that pushed everything further. Reports that Prince William had been presenting long-term stability concerns during high-level discussions. That phrase repeated in every newspaper like a warning beacon, long-term stability. Some interpreted it emotionally, others politically. A few interpreted it financially, but all interpretations landed on the same conclusion. William was deeply worried about the institution's image. The endless interviews, documentaries, lawsuits, accusations, memoirs, and the constant public tug-of-war. According to several insiders, William believed the monarchy couldn't keep absorbing hit after hit. Not from the public, not from the press, not from political critics, and still function properly. He needed clarity. He needed boundaries. And apparently, the rumour goes, he was pushing for those boundaries to be enforced. And when William pushes courtiers, listen, things escalate fast. That's about when the narrative shifted from curiosity to alarm. Commentators started saying openly what had only been whispered before. William had become the family's anchor, strategist and future planner, and he was no longer willing to let the Sussex drama overshadow the monarchy's next era. But here's where things got even more intense. Another leak suggested the secret strip order wasn't just one document, it was a set of contingencies. Multiple drafts, multiple versions, multiple options, each addressing a different outcome depending on Harry and Meghan's behaviour going forward. In other words, the palace was preparing for everything. That's the part that made people gasp. That's the part that kept royal analysts glued to their screens. That's the part that made Harry's sudden arrival look less like a casual visit and more like a full-blown crisis response. Meanwhile, back in Montecito, things weren't much calmer. Meghan had reportedly instructed her team to prepare statements for every possible scenario, which only fueled theories that she expected something major to drop. Some said she was preparing for legal action. Others said she was preparing for a full PR battle. A few insisted she was preparing for both. But what really sent shockwaves through social media was the rumour that Meghan had reacted with complete disbelief and fury at the idea the palace could act without informing her. That led to the obvious question, did Harry even know before today? Because if Meghan was blindsided, Harry might have been too, and that possibility made everything feel even more dramatic. Think about it. What would it mean if Harry learned about a threat to his family's royal titles? Not from the palace, not from family, but from someone outside the inner circle. It would explain why he moved so quickly. It would explain why he arrived alone. It would explain why he was visibly shaken. Then came the next twist. Another insider hinted that the palace's concern wasn't only about titles, it was also about precedent, protocol, and representation. Essentially, they were worried that the Sussexes were still benefiting from royal association while openly criticising the institution. In simple terms, they wanted to stop the contradictions. As those whispers spread across news outlets, royal historians started chiming in. They pointed out examples from the past when royals who acted against the crown's interest were quietly sidelined or had privileges removed. And that historical context made everyone sit up straighter. If the palace wanted to strip titles, they absolutely had precedent to lean on. But what really tugged at people's attention, the part that made even neutral observers perk up, was the mention of Harry's children. Archie and Lilibet's princely status had always been debated, but removing it, that would be enormous. Global news, a headline for years. That's what everyone feared the palace might be contemplating by midday. Royal analysts were pointing out how unusual it was that King Charles hadn't been seen, hadn't commented, hadn't released a statement. His absence only strengthened the theory that something big was being handled behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Harry's movements became the subject of minute-by-minute tracking. Some believed he went straight to Clarence House. Others claimed he headed to Windsor. A few suggested a private car was seen entering Kensington Palace's side gate, but no photos surfaced. Secrecy made everything more intense. The whole day felt like a thriller. Then the next rumour hit. A source said Harry had requested a private meeting with his father immediately, and in response, courtiers scrambled to adjust the king's schedule. The wording was vague, but the implication wasn't. Whatever Harry wanted to discuss couldn't wait. By early evening, commentators began pointing out something they'd tiptoed around all day. Harry looked like a man pushed to his limit. A man overwhelmed, exhausted, someone who couldn't believe the situation had spiralled this far. And honestly, who could blame him?
The Duke of Sussex, or Duke and Duchess of Sussex, I just find it very uncomfortable. And I think a huge number of your viewers would agree that you either respect the system.
Even people who don't love him would agree. Being caught between the palace, the press, the public and Meghan's expectations would break anyone. Add in the possibility that his children could be affected. That's enough to make anyone crumble. As the sun set over London, the atmosphere grew heavier. Buckingham Palace remained silent. Kensington Palace remained silent. Sussex representatives remained silent. Everyone was holding their breath, which made the smallest details magnified. The palace gates stayed open an unusually long time after a black car arrived. A senior aide was spotted pacing on the phone across the courtyard. The palace guards seemed unusually alert. Royal watchers were reading meaning into everything.
Well, that's what you said, Jack.
Yeah, I agree.
So we are in total agreement. They are very dependent on each other.
Some believed the King and Harry were meeting right then. Some believed William was involved. Some believed Meghan was frantically calling Harry from Montecito. Some believed lawyers had already been contacted. Some believed the strip order had already been signed. Nobody knew. Everybody speculated. That's when the final rumour of the night dropped, one that sent shockwaves through the internet. A source claimed the palace was planning an announcement. Not immediately, not tonight, but soon. Very soon. A statement that would clarify the monarchy's position moving forward. Those few words ignited every corner of royal media because palace announcements never come lightly. And after a day like this, they usually come with consequences. By the end of the night, one thing was clear. Something has shifted. Something big. Something irreversible. Harry hadn't come back voluntarily. The palace wasn't sitting quietly, and whatever happens next is going to change the royal landscape in a way we haven't seen in decades. And as London settled under the night sky, one final question echoed everywhere. From commentators, from fans, from critics, from casual observers. When the palace speaks, what exactly are they going to say? Don't forget to like, subscribe, share and comment if you want to follow every shocking update as this royal drama unfolds.